I do not know. It was like an old school UFC fight night on Saturday. And when I say old school, I mean the Fox Sports era. We don't get a lot of 10 p.m. main card Eastern starts here for the fight nights. Back in the day, back in the Fox Sports days, every single fight night had a 10 p.m. start. It was brutal. And it would go to like 1:30. They just wanted to eat up as much programming time as possible. Now we get the odd 7 to 10, 4 to 7. It's tremendous. I love it. I mean, sure, we can complain about the Apex all day long, but as far as the timing is concerned, way more favorable to us on the East Coast and to the overseas fans. So this felt like an old school one. Also, it was in a big arena, so there were just some elements of that. So I didn't check in with the guys, and I'm looking forward to hearing how they did. Now, my friends, there's a bit of a takeover going on today's program. Yes, we have 4 guests from the world of boxing who are joining us all in studio. Now, these aren't your average guests. These are 4 of the biggest names in the sport right now. We found out Wednesday night that the highly anticipated Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia fight is in fact going to be taking place on April 20th, but not in Las Vegas, where most of us thought it would happen, not in California, where both men have lived for a good portion of their lives, but actually right here in New York City at the Barclays Center, to be exact, in Brooklyn. How incredible is this? It's been a while since Golden Boy, who are promoting the event on DAZN pay-per-view, April 20th. It's been a while since they held an event here in Brooklyn. It's been a while since there had been a big event in Brooklyn, it seems like. Pre-pandemic? There hasn't been a ton. No, Gervonta fought in Brooklyn like 2 years ago. But still, I mean, there hasn't been a ton. And there was once a time where PBC was holding events here all the time. Obviously, UFC has held several as well. So this is big for the scene, for the region. Anyway, in studio today, Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia, Oscar De La Hoya, Eddie Hearn. Golly. We have security back there. It's like, you remember the opening shot where Lennox Lewis and Mike Tyson faced off right before they went toe-to-toe in Memphis back in the day, 2002? This is like that. It's like the line of security. I mean, all 4 of these guys have issues. It's going to be tremendous theater. I can't wait. So first it'll be Devin Haney at around 1:30. Then it'll be Ryan Garcia at 2:30. Then it'll be Oscar at 3. Then it'll be Eddie Hearn at 3:30. And there's a ton going on in the world of boxing, not only pertaining to this fight, but also regarding Canelo's future, Terrence Crawford's future, PBC's future, just all kinds of stuff. So I can't wait. They're all going to join us in studio today. It's going to be madness. It's going to be absolute madness. But before we get into all of that, buckle up. It will be a fun day. And what a day we had on Wednesday with the likes of Alex Pereira in studio and Plinio. And how about those 2 guys saying that they were done with their travels, and then I see them in Mexico City? These guys are world travelers. I see them in Mexico City, front row, living the dream. Plinio with the freaking Lucha Libre mask. Looked fantastic as a luchador. Shout out to Rey Mysterio as well. Seemed to be loving life over there. Also, we had Elimination Chamber. We had the great KSW event, Ryzen. Just so much going on. But let me ask the guys in the back, GC New York Rick, this question. Because I actually, usually I'll start the show and we'll talk for 25 minutes and I'll wax poetic on this, that, and the other, and then I'll go to them. But I actually want to go to them right off the bat. And I'll start with you, GC. Biggest story of the weekend. What's the biggest story of the weekend? This past weekend. You could go in several different directions, right? You can go Francis, you can go PFL Bellator. PFL, doesn't have a strong showing. 5-1 they lose on the main card. You can go, obviously, UFC in Mexico and those different permutations. You could go off the grid, and I have a contender for that as well. What are you going for as far as the top? If you're in the office on a Monday and you're at the water cooler and Joe from accounting says to you, hey, what was the biggest story in combat? What are you saying to him?
I actually was just at the water cooler, and our guy Miles was like,
oh, wow.
What was the biggest story in the combat weekend? I'm between Brian Ortega and the comeback against Yair, the comeback period, to see him have that layoff and come back and get a huge win over Yair Rodriguez. Also, the 2 Mexican stars, Yair Rodriguez and Brendan Moreno, both falling short in the main and co-main event. But I'm actually going to go with the return of Francis.
Wow.
Hernan Ferreira winning in 21 seconds against Ryan Bader and essentially locking up a fight where he'll be paid millions of dollars and fight Francis Ngannou in his return to MMA. I really was. That's the thing. Supposedly, I really was beginning to doubt if he was just going to stay in boxing for the rest of his career. But it seems like there are plans in place. He was there at the fight. Wish we had gotten him in the cage. But if this comes to fruition, this is the biggest story of the weekend for me.
Okay, so I have multiple things to say on those two things, the Ortega win and the Francis win. But first, let me give Rick a chance to weigh in. Biggest story of the weekend.
Clarissa Shields won.
Another win by the Guo baby. Whoa! All she does is win. It's the PFL and Bellator era beginning for me. It's we get to see the first glimpse of what the new second promotion, for all intents and purposes, or co-leader, if you ask Don Davis, in MMA is. And I think that's important. I think that setting the tone and establishing what this is going to be and getting off to a start after, it seemed like the end of the PFL season seems like ages ago, seems like a lifetime ago. And in that time since they've acquired Bellator, this feels like the beginning of something. Now, I'm not intentionally not giving my grade for it yet because I imagine we'll speak more about it. But to me, that is the most significant thing with the longest lasting effects is that the PFL Bellator era kicked off. And we've now seen what that will look like and got a glimpse of what that will look like moving forward.
Okay, so obviously there's no wrong answer here. All, tremendous stories, big stories worth talking about, debating, dissecting. I'll actually go off the grid and say for the sport on the whole, as far as like what was the biggest story, I actually think the biggest story happened on Sunday afternoon in Madrid at the Santiago Bernabeu. I think Ilia Topuria, and we have the footage right here, and we could run it as I'm talking about it. Ilia Topuria being welcomed, showered with praise and love, an ovation, 85,000 people at the Bernabeu prior to the Sevilla Real Madrid match. There he is, shaking hands. You see his buddy Sergio Ramos jumping in there, who now plays for Sevilla. He was in the front row when he fought Josh Emmett back in June. This moment right here for the sport, a moment like this, to me, felt unfathomable 5-6 years ago. This is one of the most storied, celebrated, decorated clubs, sporting clubs, regardless of sport, on the planet. Having a moment like that at the beginning of a big match for a UFC champion, a guy who just won the belt a week ago, not a UFC champion who's defended it 5-6 times, just won the belt a week ago. And I know that the UFC and La Liga, which is where Real Madrid plays, I know they have some sort of partnership. Great. That doesn't mean they have to do something like this. It obviously helps. It doesn't hurt. But to do that only tells me that they're very serious about going to Spain, that they're serious about doing something in conjunction with Real Madrid and the Bernabeu. And then I saw, okay, so that's gigantic. I mean, look at that. And, you're on the clock, Premier League. You got to do so. I know Leon Edwards had a little nice moment at Aston Villa, but that was like, 3 title fights in. We need something at the Etihad for Tom Aspinall. We need more for Leon. We need more. I mean, if La Liga is doing that at a Real Madrid match, we need more from the top league in the world. But point is, that's gigantic, not only for Ilia, but the sport in a territory that has never hosted a UFC event before. They haven't really developed that many great local stars. There's been a couple of guys here and there over the years from Spain, but nothing like this that would warrant something like this. That is gigantic. And so then that leads me to what GC just said about the co-main event on Saturday, because the co-main event to me was fascinating and the biggest and most interesting fight of the weekend, and that was Brian Ortega versus Yair Rodriguez. Brian Ortega wins, and we'll get into the win in a moment. But I saw some people saying like, oh my God, what a disaster for the promotion, what a disaster for UFC's debut in Spain, X, Y, and Z. Let that clip that we just showed be a reminder. Ilia Topuria could fight anyone whenever they go to Spain. He could fight me. He could fight those two guys in the back together. He could fight a broomstick. He could fight this guy right here and sell that place out. And yes, I know the 85,000 people weren't there for Ilia. They were there to watch the match. But you see the ovation. You see the media that is covering him there. You see the attention that this is receiving. You see the people backing him. It doesn't matter if you, obviously from a storyline standpoint, from a beef standpoint, from all that, Yair versus Ilia would have been tremendous. Can't do it right now, maybe down the line. It doesn't matter if it's Max. It doesn't matter if it's Brian. It doesn't matter if it's Volk. It doesn't matter if it's Movsar. It doesn't matter if it's Josh Emmett too, Bryce Mitchell, name them. It doesn't matter. He is that big of a deal and only getting bigger if he can defend the title successfully a few times. So initially I was thinking like, this is a bit of a bummer. But then you see something like that, and then you take a step back and you see the reaction to him winning over the past week, the reception when he landed at the airport and whatnot. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter at this point. He is reaching that status where if they book him to fight in Spain, and in particular in that stadium, I don't think the opponent matters. They can do no wrong at this point with him, in my opinion. Guys, agree or disagree?
Agree. Strong agree. I mean, he's the man of the moment right now. Like he feels like he has all the momentum. We continue, and everybody continues to kind of talk about Conor McGregor, but this is the trajectory. This is how you get to that, is by taking advantage of these opportunities, people talking about you, the world kind of paying attention, and then when you have that attention, submitting your best moments. And so if he can continue to do that, if the next fight looks as good as the last fight, and he can parlay that to the next one and the next one and the next one, the sky's the limit for the guy. He's got the world within his grasp right now. Like it seems like he can do no wrong, and if he continues to submit the performances he has, man, I'm excited about what the future holds for him.
100%. And I mean, his next fight has to be in Spain. I think that's inarguable. Like it's got to be in Spain. And you're talking about he could fight a Broom, whoever. Max Holloway is not a bad person to fight. I mean, that guy has star power on his own. I think that fight would just be monumental. I mean, as big as it gets. I feel like that's all I can say when it comes to Ilia Topuria lately.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I just wonder if Max wins and looks great against Justin Gaethje, why not just stay at 55? Although you can make a case Max versus Ilia is a bigger fight on a worldwide level than him versus Islam, like in Las Vegas or wherever they do that. I don't know.
If Max is in that spot and has those choices, I think there's an easy answer, right? Like I think Ilia is the answer.
I think it is too. I actually think it is too. Like
I wonder who's more famous on a worldwide level right now, Islam or Ilia?
No, Islam's got some big cachet, but in front of a stadium in Spain, the opportunity to play spoiler for the UFC's new pet project, man, that's something. And in a division that you've ruled for the longest time until Alexander Volkanovski came along, that's a tempting offer for somebody like a Max Holloway to be able to do. I don't think there's a bad answer there, right? Like you're talking about the two champions in two prominent weight classes. Like you're in a good. If Max Holloway can pull this off, he's in a really good spot. But I think you have to go with the Ilia fight.
It is also interesting. I think Islam tweeted this morning in response to Ilia mentioning his name and saying that he's going to fight Justin Gaethje on June 8th. Obviously, those plans aren't set in stone or anything. But
June 8th.
Yeah, I think that's what Islam.
That's what he said.
Yeah,
that's less than 2 months.
He did say that a while ago.
That's less than 2 months after UFC 300.
Oh yeah, maybe it wasn't today. But
I know there was some back and forth between Ilia and Islam, but June 8th seems rather quick.
Yeah, don't take me on that. I thought it was today. I had to have seen it on some sort of aggregator site.
But what me?
He said it recently though. That you're not pulling that out.
No.
That was like a month ago. Maybe he said that. So
yes, which once Justin was booked for April 13th, like I guess anything can happen, but I just don't see him. I don't see that fight at UFC 300 ending in 2 minutes and just being like those guys are going to need some time. You know what I mean?
I think a decent amount of time.
They're going to need some time. But let us talk about Brian Ortega, because what a journey that was on Saturday, right? Okay, so the two biggest stories coming out of Saturday night in Mexico City were Brandon Royval beats Brandon Moreno in a hotly contested, very close matchup. In the end, I thought the right guy won. Brandon Royval wins. And there's a trickle down effect there regarding UFC 301, because I think a lot of us thought, all right, Moreno wins, you do Moreno versus Pantoja to 301. That is pay-per-view worthy. Not sure if Royval versus Pantoja 2, especially considering they just fought in December, is pay-per-view worthy. That's fine. Let's just pause on that one for a moment. Co-main event to me was the bigger fight. Yair and Ortega. So much at stake here because of the stuff that Yair was saying. And because the division is in focus, because there's a new king, all that stuff. Yair on fire all week. Ortega seems to be in great spirits. Back for the first time since 2022 when they fought on Long Island and the fight ended unceremoniously because Ortega gets hurt. He's there with his kids. Seems to be in really great form. Buffer is announcing him in the cage, and I'm watching this, and he's jumping up and down, and then all of a sudden, like, you see him wince, and you're like, did something just happen to Brian Ortega? Did you guys notice right away as well? I remember texting you guys. I'm like, I think the dude just hurt himself. I didn't know exactly what had happened, but it definitely seemed like something was bothering him, right?
I mean, we since know that, like, they showed a great replay of it. Dude rolled his ankle pretty bad, like in the warm up, and by all accounts from people that were there and watching on TV, he looked like he was a little bit shell shocked from that moment, and admitted as much in the post fight press conference as well.
It was wild. It was like, what? Why do weird things always seem to happen to this guy in Mexico? Remember the Yair and Jeremy Stevens fight ended in seconds with the eye poke and whatnot. And so I thought that he was in trouble. It seemed like something was bothering him, and then you see him like jump up, and you're like, is his ankle going to snap? What's going to happen here? And then Yair looks amazing in the first round, right? He looks fantastic. Like, oh, he's going to do it. It's all coming together for Yair. And then he ends up losing. It was a shocking turn of events. I thought Ortega was done. The ankle and the shots he was taking, right?
Dropped bad, and then it looked like Yair was going to finish the fight at any moment. I mean, it was an insane comeback. It was really great. I mean, the bounce back in round 2, and then to get the finish in round 3. I mean, it was an incredible performance by Brian Ortega. But yeah, the ankle, I didn't notice it until the broadcast pointed it out. But yeah, it looked like he was in some pretty serious pain.
And good on them for showing it. I love that they did that.
Yeah.
That's sometimes stuff that they might want to like sweep under the rug. No, I love that they showed it. It felt...
When they showed that, I was like, wow, they got it instantly. Before the fights, the bell rang, they had this replay, and I was like, wow, this is elite production right here. This is what you hope to see.
This is great. This is transparent. I love everything about it. And so Ortega, and there was so much there. Ortega wins. He submits him. Great submission. We see later on...
Henner
Gracie posting the clip of them working on that exact arm triangle choke, almost in the exact same position. And those videos are always very fun. Henner's always on top of that stuff. And he seems to have held on just a little bit long. He did say afterwards that he was having problems with his hearing, with his eardrums. Couldn't tell. It was very loud in there. There seems to be a lot of love between those two.
I was going to say, it's very clear that it wasn't intentional because of how much love he has for Yair.
Yeah, I didn't view it as like a Babalu Sobral, Chuck Liddell situation where someone was trying to like really hold on to hurt the guy. I think he was just, in a different dimension perhaps, clutching on for dear life. And then what about that moment afterwards where he tells Mark Goddard not to raise his hand because, as he put it in his video with Henner, like, I did the job, I got the win, that's that. I've never seen that before. Like, he was almost unsure how to celebrate.
Well, even if you look back to the last time they fought, and if you look to the face-off after the weigh-in, there's clearly just a lot of respect and love and admiration between the two guys, almost to the point where it's like, they maybe would have liked to avoid each other if they could have, but recognize that they're in an important position in both of their careers, and they just respect each other, and he doesn't want to, make it a moment where Yair has to be out of the spotlight and wants to bring him into it. So I have a lot of respect for what Ortega's how Ortega's handled that. And in when the roles were reversed in Long Island, Yair trying to do the same thing for Ortega. So I think it's just a bit of mutual respect, love, and admiration between the two, and I'm happy to see it. It's lost a little bit sometimes in the sport, and it was nice to see that.
It's interesting. Main and co-main, you say, the Mexican guy didn't win, but both Brandon Royval and Ortega have ties to Mexico. Maybe not born in Mexico, but it was kind of weird that they were trying to remind the audience, like, hey, like, I'm sort of one of you as well. So it wasn't all that bad. And considering that performance and considering everything he said afterwards, and he really opened up about his trials and tribulations over the last couple of years, Ortega has always been one to wear his heart on his sleeve. Is Ortega the guy? Like, should it be Ortega? Should it, they just announced Noche UFC will be 306. So that rules out September for the Spain card. Maybe August, but it could very well be October. Then we're talking about, Abu Dhabi territory. November is MSG. We are approaching a length of time where you may feel comfortable if you're Volk's team. I really don't know which direction they're going to go in. Ortega's in the mix, obviously. Holloway, win or lose, but certainly if he wins, would be in the mix. Volk should be in the mix. If it's in a long amount of time, not if it's in like 4 months. I really don't know. Do you guys think that Ortega should trump either one of those guys? Should he? If we were going to give the number one contender slot to Yair if he won, why don't we give it to Ortega?
Well, I mean, we do this all the time. Come on. We know
No,
that
I know, but
the
why?
stakes for one is not the same as the stakes for the other. Yair has built the fight. To the point here, how about this? Explicitly, when given the opportunity to make the claim and say, I want to fight Ilia, Brian Ortega said, hey, I'm not going to give you guys a show in the cage. And then in the post-fight interview, kind of alluded to Spain and said, if Volk doesn't want the fight, I'm open to going to Spain, but isn't saying Ilia Topuria. So I don't think that, that is enough of a sign to me to say, oh, this should supersede Volkanovski or even a Holloway type name. So no, I don't think it. Just because Yair was set up for that, Yair was clearly angling for it and made his intentions clear. I don't think that it necessarily means that. And I do think from the, what do we call a quote unquote bigger fight perspective, both Max and Alex are bigger names for Ilia.
Really interesting. What do you think, GC?
Yeah, I think it should be Max. If we're not going to give,
regardless of what happens.
Regardless of what happens, yeah. I mean, if you look at he's in the last however many years at featherweight, he's only lost to Alexander Volkanovski. I mean, he's knocked off top contender after top contender. I really think that this is just an opportunity to put an incredible fight on for UFC 300, go up a weight class. I don't think what he's done at 45 should be dinged because of that. If we're not going to give Volk the immediate rematch, I think it should go to Holloway.
All right, fine. I thought it was just such an amazing performance. I mean, we'll see.
It was an amazing performance.
And by the way,
comeback in the heart was tremendous stuff.
That doesn't necessarily mean that Ortega can't fight for a title next or one more, right? Like, you can still finish business with Volkanovski or get the Holloway fight, and then Ortega can still slide in as the next contender. No problem. All
Ortega
three are.
Movsar?
Yeah, he hasn't. The only thing is he hasn't fought a lot, right? Ortega Movsar is a great fight.
Yeah, it is. It is.
There's your next contender fight.
The one thing I'll say about Ortega hasn't fought a lot is that seems to not affect him. For whatever reason, layoff, he seems to improve or at least be as good as he was before when he comes back. So I'm not as concerned about that aspect of it. Like, before the Korean Zombie fight, he came back and looked like a completely different fighter. Upended his whole life, changed everything. Before this fight, he talked about the turmoil, upended his whole life, came back and looked just as good and showed the grit that he had before. So, like, I'm not concerned about the layoff part of it when it comes to Ortega. Maybe he'll want himself to keep a little more active. But yeah, there's no bad options. Ilia Topuria's got a lot of people calling his name and a lot of good options for him to fight.
I could see a scenario, either Max Holloway loses on April 13th or looks great and stays at 155. Not enough time for Volk and his team, and Ortega is next.
You think Volk wouldn't do it tomorrow if asked?
Oh, 1,000% I think he would do it. But maybe there's people around him who say, let's just take a breath here. Okay. You know? Maybe. I'm just saying, I don't think it's a crazy thought that they say, just chill out here, sit in the front row. You're next. Your next fight is for the belt. But we get this one done. Maybe they need to do. By the way, there's a lot at stake here, but the football season, the soccer season in Spain, it ends around May, and then it resumes in, I think, August. Don't quote me, but I think that's what it is. Maybe you have to do it in that period there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Maybe
July. That July, I guess they're only going to do one pay-per-view in July this year with international.
Yeah, but I heard that's July 20th. Last I heard, again, all this could be very fluid. They can move it around easily, is that the late July one was Utah. Like last year.
Yeah.
But what's so interesting about the Bernabeu is there's a retractable roof.
Yeah.
So even if it's, in July over there in Spain is boiling hot, you can combat that. So this is all
that's always been Dana White's concern. Indoor, outdoor. Whenever he talks about the stadium show, is it indoor or is it outdoor? Do we have to worry about the elements? And if you've got the roof, then it makes things possible.
I was so impressed. I was really so impressed with both guys throughout the week, but then the win, considering everything he had been through. Now, regarding the main event, Moreno loses. I thought if he would have won, he could have been next for Pantoja. Do you do Royval versus Pantoja as the main event of 301, or like this is the new 300 main event story? What the hell are they going to do with 301? They had it right there. It was Alex Pereira. I don't think he'll turn around. That seems crazy. Almeida against Aspinall seems a little too soon too, but maybe something is, I don't know. Maybe something can be done if he gets by. Is that enough? Could they do Royval versus Pantoja 2 and just try to load the rest of the card?
Flyweight's been a division of rematches, right? A division of the kind of the cream of the crop guys, the same names kind of running it back. And not for lack of trying to create contenders, right? We had Manel Kopp as somebody who it seemed like was being groomed for a title opportunity and then missed weight. It seems like at a certain point, you just have to go with who's available. And I'll tell you two guys who are always available, Brandon Moreno and Brandon Royval. When it's time to fight, they're there. They will step up and they will fight every single time. And so you have to reward them in a certain capacity when that's the thing. Alexandre Pantoja could headline that Brazilian card and is looking for an opponent. You could do a lot worse than Brandon Royval. I don't think we got the best of him in that fight. And I think there would be a better performance if we had it this time. It's not great. It's hard to convince people if he's already beat him twice and all of a sudden he's jumping in there for a third. But what better option is there at this point?
I mean, I guess it's. I don't think you can wait for the UFC 300 main event.
No, you're rolling the dice there too much. And then,
like there's a very real world where there's no way Pereira can make that turnaround.
Or
did you guys think, by the way?
What if you book it though, and then you hope that you get Alex Pereira to turn around, and if you don't, then you have that as the main event anyway. The main event you would have had, now you have that main event anyway.
You're saying announce Pereira?
No, announce Pantoja and Royval.
Yeah.
Okay.
Say this is the fight, and then you hope Pereira turns around, clean win over Jamal Hill, hops in. Now you've got the best of both worlds. Now you put that above, and you're good. I don't hate that.
That's okay. What about
Royval,
this one?
This will be if they fight, then 3 of Pantoja's last 5 fights.
I just don't think it happens. What about this one from Shaheen in our chat here?
Okay.
Muhammad Makhayev, if he wins
That's what
on
I was
Saturday.
thinking. He's got a big fight against Alex Perez. He's only at 8 and he's fighting 7, but I mean, it really does come down to what other options do you have?
He falls short, by the way, of the record. I think he's like 30 days away.
He's not going to be able to get it in time. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking at the rankings, like Amir Albazi,
is that pay-per-view headline worthy, or does it not really matter at this point?
Well, he was supposed to be in that fight. You get to skip out on the Moreno fight and just get a title shot anyway, even though Royval was the one that won it.
I think he needed that fight against Moreno.
I think he did too. I think if he won against Moreno, then it's a no-brainer to put him in there.
No, I'm talking Makhayev against. If Makhayev wins, is that
no? But we were saying Albazi doesn't feel.
No.
Is Makhayev?
Yeah, I mean,
Makhayev will have more buzz and momentum if he wins.
Yeah.
Than Albazi at this point.
Yeah. Oh, for sure, no doubt. Like if he can go out,
that Albazi for sure.
If he goes and gets a finish, that'll be like 4 finishes in a row for him, and now he's getting on the upper echelon of the rankings. Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at
does he have more than Royval though? That's the debate, right?
Yeah, that is the debate.
I feel like Royval beating Brandon Moreno says something to me. That's
hard to go right back to. We just saw it in December.
I get it, and it wasn't competitive either.
Right. I've seen it twice as well.
Yeah,
finished him in the first one. 50-45 in the second one, and now we're going to go right back to it. I just don't know.
Did you guys think that Royval won the fight? Because I know
for sure.
Okay, there were some people who said
by the end he was putting it on him. Dude.
I know
Moreno was
the output was nuts.
Second half of the fight, he completely took it away.
I was actually laughing in like the 4th and 5th round. The output that he was putting out, and I was just thinking about how he was like, altitude's fake. It's just a mental thing. It's just a mindset. Because I mean, to him, it really did seem just like a mindset. Like he was putting out insane numbers at the end. It feels like we've never really seen Brandon Moreno like that, just getting completely outworked, especially in those later rounds.
Here's what it'll take for me. The performance was impressive enough that I'd be okay with the title opportunity. If Makhayev gets an insanely impressive, spectacular win and hops on the mic and calls for the title shot, I'm okay with that superseding it. Ultimately, that's what it's going to take for me. You need to have the performance of your life, and you need to get on the mic and say, "This is my title opportunity. I'll see you in Brazil." Royval did it, and I'm enough convinced that that seems like a pretty solid option
in front of the raucous Apex crowd.
Fuck. What if Alex Perez goes out there and chokes out Makhayev in the first round?
It is I mean, that would be nuts.
But then you also have the issue of Alex Perez.
Yes,
fought Pantoja a year and a half ago and got finished in 90 seconds. The odds are Makhayev like minus 350.
Imagine this was the card that was supposed to be in Saudi Arabia. Makhayev would obviously be a big star there.
This was all set up for Kopp, and then it was all set up for Moreno.
Yep.
And neither guy got it done.
It was all set up for Albazi too. I mean, that was essentially a title eliminator for Albazi versus Moreno.
Yep. Best slate plans. Flyweight just can't Flyweight
Flyweight
just
is
can't
tough,
escape the
yeah.
rematches.
When was the last time Kai Kara Francois? The Albazi fight?
Yeah.
It's like you can't really put him in over it.
What was
Albazi
that,
just
like
pulled
in
out of a
June
fight.
or something.
June of
that feels
last
like-
year.
Yeah.
Mateus Nicolau got
Wow.
knocked out by Brendan Royval. Manel Kape, obviously the weight issues. Then Alex Perez is fighting Muhammad Mahayev at 7-8.
Yeah, it's a doozy.
And that it feels like that's what's going to have to be the main event if you want Brazilian ties.
I got
301.
Alex Pereira could do it. If anybody can do it, that guy could do it.
If he somehow wins at 300, main event's 301 and wins there too.
We've made so much and talked about how much he's accomplished in such a short amount of time. It's what he does. It's just what the dude does.
Let's throw it out there. He wins 300. He goes and defends again at 301.
God,
and then
incredible.
for his 10th and final UFC fight, he moves up to heavyweight, wins the belt to heavyweight.
And then he retires?
Retires off in the sunset. You get 10
Who's
fights
the
out of me.
opponent,
and
by
I'm
the
done.
way? Who's the opponent on May 4th?
You know, who? It doesn't matter.
Magomed Ankalaev.
Yeah.
Nah, give it to
Whatever.
Khalil Roundtree. Give it.
Sure. That's fine.
This is
That's
Khalil
fine.
Roundtree. I love Khalil, but
Let's do it.
Come on.
You can make the case for Ankalaev, dude.
Khalil
Any of
Roundtree
them.
would be sick.
I mean, it would be sick. It would be a sick fight.
Oh my God, that fight would be incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like someone is guaranteed to go out. But I mean, you're talking about Magomed Ankalaev, who lost the title fight by a draw, 3 in the rankings, and Khalil Roundtree at 8.
Let's talk about PFL. So PFL on Thursday had this announcement on SportsCenter where Francis Ngannou was on saying that he would fight the winner of Renan Ferreira and Ryan Bader. And when I checked in on this, even though Francis was involved in the breaking news segment, when I checked in on it, my impression was that he wasn't 1,000% on board, which I thought was interesting. And I was like, well, he was in the segment. I know he's attending the event. All right, let's see. Then we get to the fight itself, and we'll talk about the fight and the card in a moment, but let's talk about the main event. Main event, I thought, couldn't have gone better for PFL. I thought the more sellable fight is Ferreira versus Ngannou because of how he looks. He's 6'8". He's knocking people out. Bader, to me, never felt like a real heavyweight. There's a big difference fighting the likes of Fyodor at the end of his career and fighting Francis Ngannou. And it works out great. He beats him and knocks him out in like 21 seconds. And then I'm like, all right, he's right there. They're going to get the face-off. We don't get the face-off. So now I start to wonder, is he actually... That's why when GC brought it up, I agree with him, and I agreed with him that that was a massive story, but is he actually on board? Now, what I'm being told is the plan is they want him to fight this year in MMA, obviously. If he loses to AJ, they want the fight to be late summer. If he beats AJ, they want the fight to be in December. I still feel like there are people who don't believe he ever fights for PFL or in MMA. And I'm not going to say I'm one of those people, but after he was sitting right there and didn't go into the cage, perhaps there was a miscommunication. Perhaps he had to go. Perhaps he wasn't told. Perhaps he needed to be somewhere else. Who knows? Maybe in the next couple of weeks we ask him that question if we're speaking to him. But it did give me great pause and make me wonder, if he beats AJ, like this train is so far past the MMA station, how do you get him to come back to fight Problema? I don't think that Problema is a horrible option anymore. I think that if you show enough highlights and the face-off and all that stuff, it is sellable. It's not like you're just throwing out some, no-name washed-up heavyweight or someone that is just getting decisions that the people don't care about. Like, these are some nice highlights that he's racking up. I just felt like him not going into the cage to do the face-off gave me great pause. Did either of you feel that way?
Yeah. It felt like it was sitting right there for them to do the face-off, and him not doing it told me something.
Right?
He didn't just stay in the crowd too. He just dipped. He was just gone.
They also are showing him every 4 seconds when John Jones is talking, and then Problema wins, and he's not anywhere to be seen other than leaving the arena. So, yeah, I would have picked it if I would have thought that this would have been significant, and I would have said that would have been one of the bigger moments of the weekend if I actually had any confidence that Francis Ngannou cared about this.
Do you
But I
think he
don't.
doesn't care about it? Or is it just giving you some kind of
It's
doubt?
giving me pause.
Yeah.
It's making me hesitate. I believe, this is what I'll say about Francis Ngannou, and I believe I said this last week on one of the MMA fighting shows. Francis Ngannou appears to be a man of his word, right? I believe Francis Ngannou when he says something, and he seemed to post it about like, okay, these are the next guys. If he has told somebody that he will do it, then I believe he will do it. Is it going to be next? Are there going to be boxing fights between then? Is there going to be a rematch with this person? Is he going to fight Tyson Fury? That is too unknown. It remains to be seen. We don't know how any of this is going to play out. But if he has said to somebody at PFL or anywhere else that he is going to fight the winner of that fight, I believe it. I believe that he's a man of his word and he will keep his word. But it doesn't get me excited when the biggest star in the company leaves the arena when they've just said that this fight is for all the marbles. This fight is going to be the next challenger, and he just walks away. It doesn't help. I think it hurts PFL more so than it does anything about the fight itself. It doesn't hurt the fight as much as it hurts the PFL brand, in my opinion.
It is. I mean, it is understandable. You're fighting Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, and let's be honest.
Absolutely.
The vast majority of MMA fans don't know who Renan Ferreira is. And by the way, shout out to the fans out there who you gave me a good chuckle, who were saying after the event, watch Ariel go on the show on Monday say that this event was bigger than UFC 300 or that this is big. Like, no, I know what that was. That was PFL acquiring Bellator and doing their best in a pretty short amount of time to put together a PFL versus Bellator card. Best laid plans often go awry. And in the end, we only got one true champion versus champion fight. The Impa versus Johnny Eblen fight was champion versus champion, but different weight classes. The heavyweight fight was the only true one. There were a bunch of injuries. People weren't available. The weight classes didn't match up. A lot of bad luck went along the way. I don't think it was a disaster. I don't think it was bigger than Mexico City. I don't think it was obviously not as big as 300. You're kidding yourselves, and I know that it's a joke, but I don't think it was a disaster, and especially given the result, I don't think it was a disaster. And what I mean by that is Bellator went 5-1. People said, oh, what a disaster for PFL. Did you forget that PFL bought Bellator? It's all the same. It's the same company. So now they can go out and say, this is the company that beat us 5-1. And oh, by the way, to the company that we're trying to sell the TV rights to here in the United States, you're getting a superior brand. You're getting better than what the PFL is. Like, you could spin it any which way you want. It's not like they are Bellator versus Ryzen and then they go their separate ways. It's all the same company. It doesn't matter. And who out there was saying that PFL was better than Bellator before all this? We've sat on this show and said, go through the roster, go through the champions. PFL is better in every single weight class. Every single weight class
is better.
Excuse me. Bellator is better in every single weight class. Excuse me. Bellator champ versus PFL champ. Bellator roster versus PFL roster. Bellator was better on paper in every single category, every single weight class. This was not a revelation. And I would say if there was one fight there that I thought, the Bellator guy's in trouble, was the main event. I thought it was a very entertaining card. I thought the Eblen fight was super entertaining. Kind of wish there were 2 more rounds. It was dicey for Eblen. We've never really seen him in that kind of trouble. Spirited stuff from Impa Gasangane. Big win for AJ McKee. Like, what was so bad about it? I think it's like, it's a fascinating thing to watch fans and media just openly shit on PFL and almost like not want them to be a player, not want them to have moments. Now, I don't know what it is, but you see them just shitting all over them, all over the timeline. And I'm watching the event and I'm like, there's certainly things that you can fix. The audio was messed up. The lighting wasn't great. The John Jones thing was a little bit clunky, but how do you not take that opportunity with John Jones being there in attendance? The Francis thing didn't really play out as they wanted. But as far as like the results and the fights and even the look with the throne and the flags and all that, like, I thought it was a pretty damn entertaining Saturday afternoon card. What's that?
The pacing was huge. The improvement in pacing, I know there were 5-round fights on the PFL Championship, but the pacing of this card was so much better. And I even saw, like, everyone was ripping on it at the beginning. You know, we had to wait through a 30-minute pre-show, and then there was another 19, 20 minutes before we got to the first fight. But once the fights kicked off, they kept it rolling, man. There was really not a ton of downtime in between fights, which was nice to see. Because last time I was watching PFL was in November during the championships, and it was just like, please, for the love of God, can we just get to the end of this? This is taking so long. I cannot believe this thing is still going. It was like a 5-hour main card in November. This was like 2.5.
Did you enjoy it?
I mean, I was fine with it. It was a decent pack of fights for a Saturday afternoon. I thought the Eblen Impa fight was the best one. And then it was kind of shocking to see the 21-second knockout in the main event. I think it would be great. I mean, the size of Hernan Ferreira, feel like that's the better outcome than Ryan Bader, who we've sort of seen his body of work. Hernan Ferreira is sort of this unknown, massive dude that gets 20-second knockouts.
Rick, you want to say something?
I came in thinking that this resembled on paper a Bellator card, right? That it was just a good Bellator card. That if you put your hand over the side of the PFL of it and just said, these are the opponents that are going to be facing these Bellator fighters on a Bellator card, it was a significantly better product than that. And I walked away thinking, actually, this was a decent first effort. It seemed like there was some changes made and some motion and momentum toward improving some of the things. And I actually thought it was an enjoyable fight card. Agree with you to a certain extent that, like, PFL losing the matchup to Bellator doesn't matter. They own both those companies.
Yeah, who cares?
It does not matter. There is a part of it, a secondary, an ancillary part of it that does matter, which is you are by not combining the brands, by not combining the talent pool of Bellator and PFL, you are presenting a product in PFL in these tournaments that becomes a lesser product. You're now tiering your own product. You are now saying the fighters who win these PFL tournaments are probably not good enough to even beat the brand champions in the other tournament, in the other side that we own. And that to me is a little bit of a miscalculation. I think that the brand should be combined and always, and I thought that in the beginning, and I still think that now, that I think that ultimately you are hurting the PFL tournament brand by keeping the Bellator fighters separate. Because ultimately everybody now knows, okay, these guys aren't going to beat UFC champions, and now they're not even going to be Bellator champions. You're not even co-leader within your promotion as PFL. And so I think that hurts. I don't think the one night of losing 5-1 hurts. I don't think that the stakes were enough for that. But I do think that you are now lessening the impact of what it means to be a PFL tournament winner, because you're allowing this other element to say, these fighters that we also have on our roster are probably better than the fighters that are going to be in this tournament.
Yeah, I'm actually with you on that. I like it. I like the PFL versus Bellator sort of as the first kickoff event, but letting it go too long.
Meaning you don't want to see this again next year?
No. I think you should combine the brands, because I actually think Rick has a point. Like, you are lessening. Because, I mean, outside of the Impa-Evelyn fight and then the Fajeda knockout, the Bellator fighters essentially made it look easy. Like, especially the AJ McKee fight, the Vadim Nemkov, and the Jason Jackson fight. All three of those were just easy work for them. So
the Bellator guys are better. They're just better.
Exactly.
But this is my point. Why pit
PFL gloves?
Why pit them against each other if they're better?
Oh, no.
We all knew this.
I think
don't do it.
It's a promotional thing. Maybe they have a 3-year deal or whatever amount of year deal with Saudi Arabia and say, hey, every February we're going to have this Super Bowl-like card. I think we probably see it for the next, 2 years, meaning this year and next year. At some point, as you know, Rick, at some point, they always merge, right? WC merged. Pride merged. Pride never even got off the ground when they were bought by Zuffa. Remember, the original plan was to have Pride run as a separate entity.
Yeah.
Strikeforce, it was 1.5 years, and then they were done. Eventually, they will merge because they'll need the talent, they'll need the people. For now, though, I don't hate it.
It's usually the company that has the more talent acquiring the company that has the less.
Sure. In this case, they punched up.
Reversed.
Yeah. It's a great point.
They need this. They need these fighters. Johnny Eblen, Patchy Mix, AJ McKee should have headlined this card.
Against who?
I personally don't need the champ versus champ gimmick. I think I think I'm making my point clear. Is it? It was a drubbing. What was fun? What did we see?
Yeah, it's fun on paper, and also it didn't work out. Imagine we got Cyborg Pacheco.
Okay, now we're talking.
They just had bad luck. I think they just had bad luck. Honestly,
there's an element to that.
By the way, their last card wasn't that long ago. It was in late November.
And this feels like a lifetime.
I know, but it just like from a timing standpoint, it was 3 months ago. That's a quick turnaround.
The world is a different place.
And yes, I know that, but actually from a day's standpoint, from a calendar standpoint, and by the way, they made this announcement regarding the season, and that's in 2 months. And there's some of the names competing on this. That's a quick turnaround. By the way, what'd you make of
it's hurting it.
Jason Jackson, Cedric Doumbé? You in?
That's too soon for Doumbé.
Don't like it.
Yeah, man. Jason Jackson's not a guy.
He's really turned into a great fighter. Shout out to him.
First of all, even if he never did anything else, when you beat Amasov, like, you're a dude. Like, you're legit. He's looked incredible. I don't think Cedric Doumbé is ready for that, and I say that as the foremost Cedric Doumbé advocate. That's too soon to be fighting a guy who's that high caliber. I don't think he's ready for that. It's smart by. Don't get me wrong. It's a very smart call out by Jason Jackson, because if you can get that fight, that feels like one of the bigger fights you can get in the promotion. But I think that's way too soon for Doumbé. I would hope that they give him somebody. I
love that Jackson said it.
Yeah, I love that too. But from Doumbé's perspective, I don't like it. From Jackson's perspective, I love it. And from the promotion, I would hope that they would, have him slow rolled a little bit more. But I think the most important thing, and Shaheen mentioned this last week, and I want to reiterate it. It's very clear that there's effort in this, right? This is not just a coasting. The PFL has not acquired Bellator and is just going like, we're just going to sit on it. And I can appreciate, even though I am being critical of the format. I didn't like the champion versus champion format. I don't like that the rosters are merged. Ultimately, what we saw, though, is a promotion, an organization that is trying. An organization that is saying, we are trying to put our best foot forward. And you mentioned it. Maybe they couldn't have gotten Pacheco and Cyborg done, but that's not for lack of trying to get these fights made, or Cyborg versus Kalo, or whatever the way it was supposed to go. And they didn't have the divisions for Patchy Mix. There was some unfortunate circumstances. But the promotion is trying to put their best foot forward and trying to be a competitive product. And I can appreciate that. And I think that's a valuable effort put forth by them. That's ultimately what my takeaway was. It's clear that they care, and it's clear that they're trying. And I hope that continues, and I hope that they're able to build something, because that was my takeaway. I came in with pretty low expectations, and it exceeded it. I thought it was a decent night for them.
Yes, and anyone who's a fan of MMA should be a fan of other options. For the fighters, and even as a viewer, it's fun to have other options. Your level of interest on a scale of 1 to 10 in seeing Francis versus Fajeda?
Out of MMA options, because obviously no UFC fighters are on the table, I have to say that I'm more interested than most of the other ones. Like, I'm not interested in like I know Verdum or like some of these like free agent heavyweights.
I'd rather see this.
I would rather see this.
Yeah,
this is a giant. Like, he's kind of what Francis used to be in the UFC.
Yes.
Before Francis became Francis, Francis was just this big chiseled out of stone dude who's coming in there to throw hands with people and KO them. That's what he is. I'm all for that. I'm totally open to that.
I don't mind it at all.
Fighting. Yeah.
Don't mind it at all. I think the visuals will be fun.
Yes.
He's on a roll. You've got the highlights and whatnot. That's what I said. I think it couldn't have worked out better for them, given the options.
There's no Grand Slam that is not a UFC opponent for a Francis Ngannou MMA fight, right? There's nobody out there that we're going, I need to see it. I'm clamoring. I'm dying. Other than opponents that are in the UFC. So why not have a young, hungry guy who just got an insane KO over Ryan Bader to throw hands with Francis? You can do a lot worse than this. I'm in on this fight.
Isn't it annoying, though, that it seems like we've gotten more flirtation from Francis and John Jones since he left the UFC than we ever got before he was in the UFC?
It got hot and heavy toward the end of the UFC run, but yeah, I mean...
Never in person. They seem to always be in the same place.
Well, they
always at PFL events.
They also seem kind of cordial when they're in the same place. It never seems like it's really like boiling over. It always seems like they're more interested in patting each other on the belly and cracking a few jokes.
It's such a bummer. And by the way, can I just say, shocked to see John do an interview with Chael.
To see him do an interview with Chael, but also like he was in a tough spot there, man. Like
Chael or John?
John.
Yeah.
Chael's gonna roll with the punches, but John's in a tough spot there where look, he's here, he's at the event. But when he comes in, he has to stand there and kind of be the representation of the UFC preventing the big fight from happening. And he has to sit there and kind of like, delicately answer the questions. All things considered, I thought he did great, but it was very clear he was uncomfortable and trying to get out of there.
It's tough because they're talking about co-promotion.
Yeah.
He's there like half selling the event. But he's a company guy.
He has to kind of talk about he's excited about the event and talk about Francis. And then Sean O'Connell's like going straight to camera and being like, to be clear, it's not the PFL who's preventing this fight from happening. Right. It is the UFC. And John's just standing there like, that's my boss. It's a rough spot. I thought all things considered, John did pretty well in that spot. But
it does sort of feel like, can't Turkey say, yo, UFC, like make this fight?
if ever there was a time that it could happen, it's the current climate.
Here's $100 million.
Yeah, it's the current climate that could make it happen. If there's enough money on the table, maybe the
would be
UFC's
nuts.
co-promotion.
Could you
thing.
imagine? I mean, if they could get Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn, and I know that it's not. Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn stand to benefit from working together way more than the UFC stands to benefit from this. I'm not an idiot. The UFC is so far ahead of everyone.
The promotions are unequal. Right. Whereas with Frank and Eddie, you're at least coming toward a common playing field. But with this, it's UFC up here.
But if they just say, here's an upfront, and you guys get 70% of the pie, and they I think if I'm PFL, I do that.
I think the better way to approach it, not to give Turkey or anybody advice, would just to make it a third party thing. We want to purchase Jon Jones for this fight. Not necessarily it's a UFC event, not necessarily it's a Francis event. We want to do this event. We want Francis and Jon. We will purchase them so that it's not UFC necessarily having to give PFL the rub or PFL benefiting in any way from UFC. It is champion versus champion in an independent setting, in an independent thing, and we are taking the talent. We are offering to present this if you give us the talent. I think that's probably a better way to do it so that the UFC doesn't have to worry about, hey, we're elevating PFL.
The final Ariel and the Bad Guy post show that we did for ESPN in 2018, when Chael and I had that fun 6-month run before the
on your
calendars.
Backs, building ESPN Plus.
You
on
said
your
it.
Backs.
You said it. When it turned to 2019, and then the UFC took over the post shows, it was the event that was moved from Vegas to Inglewood when the weird drug test came up for Jon Jones Gustafsson 2.
Is that for real?
That's the final one, yeah.
That was only that long ago?
2018.
I thought that was like 15 years ago.
Nah, 2018.
Wow.
December of 2018. And so Chael and I went to LA, but we did the post show at the ESPN LA studios across the street from the then Staples Center, now Crypto.com Arena. Even though the event was in Inglewood, I don't know why we didn't just do the event or the post show there at the arena. We did it in that little room. Jon Jones beats Gustafsson, and we did the post show, and Jon Jones joined us live. Do you remember this? And it's me and Chael. This is the time when we did the whole thing like no one knows, no one will ever know. You know that whole thing.
The genesis of that, yeah.
Yes. And Jon comes on, and I'm not sure. I don't recall if Chael actually asked him a question yet, or if Jon just knew he was there, and he said something to the effect of like, I'm not answering any questions from Chael. Do you remember this live on the air?
Yeah.
And Chael, to his credit, like
Chael just sat back and
he just sat back.
Yeah.
He didn't throw his pen out and walk out of the room. Are we now living in a world where Chael and Jon are buddy and Jon doesn't like me? I was the icebreaker. I was the guy.
Wow, I didn't think about this.
Is that what's happening?
That he's closer now.
He's closer to Chael, who has said the most heinous, mean things about him. Now he's buddy. That
you know what it is, though?
That gives me hope.
Everybody eventually softens on Chael. Even Anderson Silva. Like
it's true.
It's because he's so consistent with his gimmick. Like you just at a certain point it breaks you down. He becomes too likable.
I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that Jon said yes to just be standing there
and was kind of laughing about it. You know, was kind of like having a good time with it.
Yeah. Wow.
He's doing the Chael impression. Jon.
Yeah. No, Jon appeared to be in great spirits. He seemed to be in a great mood. He seemed happy to be there.
And I think it's probably good to get some time away from the grind of like next fight up. You like Tom Aspinall question. Aspinall. Like I think he's probably just enjoying some time away, healing up.
And so, okay, we don't know when he's going to come back. We don't know what's going to happen. All that stuff. But it does like it's one big tease just seeing them all there. And so
the best heavyweight fights in MMA are not being made at the moment, and that's unfortunate.
And they're being made in boxing.
That is true. You're right.
Who'd have thought?
Yeah.
By the way,
what a role reversal.
Can I give a shout out to? I want to give a shout out to the PFL announce team, and in particular Sean O'Connell. I don't think people realize how hard it is to go from athlete to play-by-play guy. I do not think MMA fan. I had a conversation. I would take
that one step back, by the way. I don't think people realize like how different the role of play-by-play versus color analyst, color commentary or analyst is.
No one does.
There's big differences between those two roles, and play-by-play is the heavy lift in there. He's incredible, man. He's next level.
For those that don't know, play-by-play is, if you're a basketball fan, Mike Breen is the play-by-play guy. Mike Tirico in football is the play-by-play guy. Joe Buck, play-by-play guy. Kevin Burkhardt, baseball, play-by-play guy. Those, John Anik, play-by-play guy. Mike Goldberg, play-by-play guy. Jim Lampley, Morrinell, the guy who is kind of the host, but also has so much going on in terms of directing traffic, getting you from point A to point B, giving you the color, all that stuff. The color analyst, and I know that was confusing because I said color, but the point, the color analyst is the guy who's breaking things down. X's and O's, giving you analysis, all that stuff and more. More often than not, that guy or that woman is a former athlete. In fighting, a former fighter. Joe Rogan is really like the super exception to the rule. He came in at a different time, and credit to him, has withstood that time and is respected and revered, and people don't feel like he's just like a token celebrity sitting there. In boxing, you'll see a lot of times there'll be a third man who's not a fighter, more of a media personality, be that sort of like storyline guy. In MMA, less so, maybe some other promotions, but UFC doesn't do that, obviously.
They tend to have two of the color, basically.
Yeah.
They tend to have, two former athletes in that spot.
Sean O'Connell's a former fighter who dabbled a little bit in the second and third chair, the analyst role, and then went straight to the play-by-play role, which is just absurd. Like, I can't think of many guys. Pat Summerall did it. Pat Summerall was a former kicker that ended up becoming one of the great play-by-play guys in NFL history with John Madden. It's extremely rare.
Yeah.
And so he deserves a lot of credit. I thought
not just the rarity, but he's good objectively against anybody. He's not even just good for like the guy making the hardest transition. He's just good. He's just really good at the job. It's impressive.
Super impressive. And I thought Chael actually has told me that he doesn't love being in the booth. He likes being at the desk. I thought he was so much better there, because when Chael's in like sell mode, when he's being Mr. Promoter guy, like, it can all be just a lot. When he's actually breaking things down and reacting to the fights live, I thought he was great. I thought Dan Hardy, obviously great. Randy Couture, Chael and Randy, given their history, was great. Like, they have a pretty damn good roster of people. And even the way they used Thompson and McCarthy, I thought, was good compared to how, Bellator did it. It didn't, as GC said, it didn't slow down. It didn't, like, they were going fight after fight. Like, we don't need, this is one thing that drives me nuts. I know the UFC does like a 60-second thing. Like, we don't need 15 minutes of fill. We don't need a full like 5-minute video package. We don't need all that stuff. Once you're there, once you've bought the pay-per-view, once you've got me to sit down, once I'm already locked in, I don't need it. If you want to give me like a quick 2 minutes on why this fight is important, or what are the stakes, or who are these people, awesome. But there was too much fill time in those PFL and Bellator cards. It was nice to see it come together. And by the way, maybe it's because they're 8 hours ahead and it was getting late into the night that they had to speed it up. I don't know. I guess we'll see as they, kick things off in March and April. But overall, I thought it was a pretty darn good night.
The points where it usually dragged were points that it was spinning forward, right? It was talking to John Jones about Francis Ngannou. It was talking about Francis Ngannou fighting a new opponent. It wasn't what you're saying. It wasn't the usual, like, hey, we're going to spend 5 minutes, 6 minutes on this package of fights that you're just about to see and we can get to anyway. So I enjoyed the broadcast quite a bit. I thought it was really well done from top to bottom.
Was it a step back for Johnny Eblen?
No, I don't think so. Because I don't think there are some people, and MMA fighting has some of them, who think that Johnny Eblen is the best middleweight in the world. I wonder, today where that stands. Maybe we'll get updated rankings and we'll find out. But I don't think there's a lot of those people out there. I think there are maybe a vocal minority, and a lot of people will look to the UFC for the top middleweight. This, to me, just felt like an off night, and he said as much on Instagram. And I also think it should be stated that Impa Kasanganay is quite a different fighter than he was when he was in the UFC, and a tough night and a really big, talented fighter that it's not going to just be easy to walk in there and look great against. So I think it was a combination of Johnny Eblen just not being at his best and Impa Kasanganay being a lot better than people will remember from his UFC run, being on the end of that viral KO. Obviously, that's hard to shake and eliminate from people's mind. And that's what happened. He fought a really good fighter who looked tremendous last year and put together like a fairy tale kind of run. Ran into that, who's a guy who's coming down from a higher weight class, and had an off night. And I think in his next performance, we'll get a real gauge of where Johnny Eblen is at. But no, I don't think he loses a ton as long as he can correct what happened what happened there on Saturday night, and change it for the next fight. I don't think it hurt too much.
Does he beat DDP?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's still a work in progress.
But to be fair, I'm not one of the people who would have believed that.
Oh, really?
Before Saturday.
Did you think he would have beaten Sean Strickland or Izzy?
See, Izzy is an interesting one, right? Because you know that Izzy has a certain style that people are hoping to see that might be able to kind of counter that. So that's where that one becomes interesting stylistically. But I did not think he was the best middleweight in the world prior to this, and I still don't. But I do think that the potential's there, and I do think if he can look good against his next opponent, that I'm more willing to have the conversation. Ultimately, I'd need to see him against those guys before I can make any determination. It's very hard. It's very hard. Like, I want Patchy Mix to be in the conversation as the best bantamweight, but I have to see him fight the best bantamweights.
Now, what about this one? Because you're the perfect guy to ask this question too.
Sure. I love this.
Clarissa Shields. Clarissa Shields.
Yeah. Talk to me.
Has an aura, is one of the greatest female boxers of all time.
The greatest.
If not the greatest. Undefeated. 2-time Olympic gold medalist, pound for pound great.
Undisputed in multiple weight classes.
Undisputed in multiple weight classes, trailblazer, all that stuff and more. For whatever reason, probably monetary, challenge, something to do, she does these MMA fights for PFL, and she all of a sudden becomes extremely ordinary. She's a prelim fighter, and it's extremely ordinary. And I think, even though this may not necessarily be fair to her, I think the world of her, she's incredible, she's unbelievable. When she fights, I watch in boxing. I think that it takes away that aura from boxing. It ruins the aura that she has built. Other than the quote-unquote bag, I think it affects her legacy, it affects her aura when I see her struggling against lesser-known fighters on the prelims of a PFL card. It's not prelims of a UFC. It's not main card of a UFC. It's not even main card of a PFL. It takes away. I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze on this anymore.
There's probably some truth to that. I am viewing it through the lens of she's doing something very difficult, and she is viewing it through the lens
and
of.
She deserves praise for that.
She deserves praise for being up in her prime as the best female boxer, in my opinion, or if not one of the best, depending on where you fall in that equation. Top pound for pound female boxer who's trying MMA. And there are not men who would do that. There's not other people you will find who will do that. But you're right to say that the results matter as well, right? It can't just be, okay, praise for her continuing to try it. Ultimately, we hope to see results from it as well. And she is not doing well against lower level competition. And there might be a point where it is not worth the squeeze. If the money is good, I support it and hope she continues to do what she needs to do. But you're right, there probably is something being lost there to a certain degree. Like, if she cannot come in here and beat this level of competition in MMA, what is the long-term goal of it anyway, right? We're not building towards something. So maybe better to focus in all on the boxing. But I think she's still in the stage where she can be commended for trying something that
1,000%.
nobody else would do.
But
nobody else would do.
Once it reaches the point of, oh, wait, Clarissa Shields is on this card on the prelims, as opposed to, oh, shit, Clarissa Shields is, like, then it just becomes ho-hum. Then it just becomes, and that's a problem because she's a main event fighter. She's a headliner. She's one of the best in boxing. Again, she deserves so much credit. Please don't take this the wrong way. She's doing what everyone out there in the world of boxing refuses to do. In their prime, crossover, and do something completely different. But it's just such a hard sport when you're factoring in the ground game, when you're unable to train, 7 days a week like the MMA fighters. I just don't know if it's worth it anymore.
She has not adapted to it as quickly as you would hope, right? Like, she has not looked the way you would hope that, like, when she is having her moments in there, when she is unloading punches, you can see it, right? You can see Clarissa
she goes
Shields.
to the body and stuff, yes.
What the difference is.
Yes.
But the results are not such that she's taking people out and she's stringed together three. If she had come in there and strung together 3 first-round KOs, it'd be a different story. but she is struggling, as you would when you are somebody who is primarily a boxer and the best at what you do and coming into the hardest combat sport there is because of how varied it is and because you know that these opponents want to grapple her and want to take her to the ground. If she had a better aptitude for it, if she was coming in there and just absolutely starching everybody she fought, I think that it would be a different conversation. But I think you're ultimately correct. As somebody who thinks she's incredible and loves her, I think you're ultimately correct that there is a point where what are we getting out of this? What is she getting out of this? If ultimately it's a money play and she's getting enough money, then great, keep it going. But if not, then I don't know what does Clarissa Shields have one of the futures of an all-time prospect in MMA? I think ultimately now at this point we can say no. And so what would be the point?
One big difference between her and Holly Holm, who obviously is a boxing Hall of Famer who had great success in boxing. Holly Holm was a kickboxer as well. And so that was almost the bridge to get to MMA. Obviously, it didn't necessarily help her with the ground game stuff, but it was a bridge to get to MMA, to understand how to mix up, the kicks, footwork, and just deal with things other than punches. And so maybe that was...
And also, Holly Holm's on the end of the boxing and going into MMA and giving it her full effort and started an MMA career. Holly Holm has now had an extremely lengthy and storied MMA career. I don't see that future for Clarissa. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn. Maybe that is what she's going for. I'm not seeing the makings of that. But that was her full focus. And now Clarissa is still in her prime as one of the best, if not the best, female boxer. So it's just hard. Like, she's doing what's never been done, and so we're seeing the struggle of that, the difficulties of that.
And you know how impressive it is for someone who is so great and so dominant to humble yourself?
Yeah.
To go, like...
you could see the emotion. When she's talking about it after, she's like, man, this was tough.
Yes.
And I didn't want to go to the gym. Like, she is not wanting to go through this grind because she could go box and dominate and be as dominant as she is, but she's taking a humble path. I respect the hell. All I can say is I respect the hell.
I'm not trying to...
I know you're not.
You know what I mean? Because I know people like to clown on her because she gives you so little to clown on in boxing. You know what I mean? She's so good in boxing. There's so few holes. This might be a crazy thing to say, but just stick with me. This might be the greatest humbling of a great since Jordan went to baseball.
I mean, that's a good comparison. That's the best comparison I can think of.
She's obviously not Michael Jordan on a worldwide level and on a fame level, but
no, but what you're saying is right.
People who are at the top of their craft in sports aren't going to do something else. Someone who's a great, someone who's a great football player isn't going to say, hey, I'm going to do baseball now. Deion Sanders and Bo Jackson were those guys going up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're not... Someone who's a great speed skater isn't saying, I'm going to go play in the NHL now. It's just completely different. Those two cats did it, and she's... Off the top of my head, there might be someone else, and I know Francis is going over to boxing and is having success there.
The reverse is easy.
The reverse is
easy.
Yeah.
No, sorry. Let me not say easy. That's pretty disrespectful. The reverse is easier, right? If we're talking about going from the singular discipline to the larger multi-varied discipline, that is going to be harder than if you come from the larger discipline and then go to the singular. That's always how that's going to be. You might not have success. You can't predict that Francis is going to be able to knock down Tyson Fury, but to actually get into the arena is an easier prospect than going the reverse. But that's a great comparison. Like, Jordan in his prime is just going out trying to take whacks at 95-mile-per-hour fastballs is hard.
And it reminds me of this in that everyone mocked him.
Yeah.
Jordan stopped talking to Sports Illustrated because they put him on the cover, swinging and missing, and held a grudge against them forever because he felt like they were clowning on him. And so I can feel the same type of reaction to Clarissa because she gives you so little to clown on in the world of boxing. I'm just wondering, and maybe this is all an afterthought, and maybe no one cares in the end when she goes to, the Boxing Hall of Fame, when she gets inducted, which she will, and all that stuff. People will be like, oh, remember that she did 3 or 4 MMA fights? Good on her. What was her record again? Oh, 2-1, 3-1, 2-2. Who cares? It's just wild to see her so dominant and so elite and headlining cards and all that stuff. And then in this world, she's on the prelims and, someone's laying on her and she's just barely squeaking out wins.
I get it. Who are the boxing opponents there for her? You know what I mean? Like, it's coming down to a fighting while you have your time. she has her window. She's fighting, and it's just like there's not those can't miss opponents out there for her.
Yeah, it's got to hurt you as so like Katie Taylor would never.
Katie Taylor would also never win a fight against Clarissa Shields. How about that?
Oh no, I'm talking about Katie Taylor would never even put herself in this position.
Yeah, because she also is like losing boxing matches. That
No, sorry. I meant Katie Taylor would never let herself be laid on and struggle like
she wouldn't. She's boxing.
Nah, she would knock him out. She would knock him out. Actually, Amanda Serrano has made the transition, but this was well before she became Amanda Serrano.
Yeah,
she is today.
Exactly, but also she did very well and had an aptitude for it. But the bigger fights were for boxing. Were in boxing for her.
Thanks for watching. We appreciate it very much. Hey, if you like this video, give us the old thumbs up. Subscribe as well. You could get many more of these videos on the channel, so please do that. We would love you forever if you did so.